welcome back to Brogressive. We are returning to our first guest, Armand Domalewski. It's good to have you back.
I'm glad to be back. Wish it was under better circumstances, obviously.
So do we. I was going to say, it's kind of hard having your 401k get turned into, I'd say a 301k, but we'll downgrade it to 201k now. So if we can knock off another K. Anyways, so I would say it's been a couple, 3 months. We've had a lot of things happen in the meantime. Obviously, we started this show November 27th. Our first episode went live with you, but now here we are. I want to say, what is it, April 7th, right? April 7th, and we are less than 3 months into the Trump presidency. Nothing but a disaster. So, figured first things first, your stock portfolio, how's it doing?
Sucks.
That's
I am a little bit fortunate in that I left a job recently before all this stuff started, and I had a bunch of stock I'd accumulated because we had like a stock program in the company, and I was like, I need to diversify a little. Like, so much of my holding is in one company, so I sold, and now I'm sitting on a bunch of cash. I think I'm probably gonna. I don't know. It's tricky to say when to. I want to buy at some point soon, but who knows? Like, there's just like more and more. It's really, really uncertain. So right now, just sitting in a money market fund and making a little bit of money. But yeah, I mean, my investments look very, very rough. I'm particularly concerned more for my parents who have, they're retired. And what sucks is my dad is a Republican. And so he was like all gung ho. What's funny is like during Biden, he really insisted on buying gold, which did fine, but not particularly amazing. Like, gold tends to rise if the whole economy is rising steadily. But then now he's like, oh, I want to buy Bitcoin. And I talked him off the ledge. He wanted to put like hundreds of thousands. We just put like a bit in Bitcoin and in like the stock market. And just as he bought, like, Trump has nuked the economy. But I haven't shaken his faith yet. He's like, oh, there's a plan.
It had to be done. That's what I've heard from multiple people in my frat who have shown me their brutal portfolios in the last few days. Like, oh, it had to be done. The economy was broken. I was like, was it? It seemed like I was doing pretty good, but I think there's some people coming around. We'll see.
If my textiles are not made within a mile radius of my house, the economy is broken. I'm sorry, that's just
very true.
It's just the truth.
They can only be made by a straight white American man.
Yes.
If there's any woman involved, even if they're involved in an Australian skincare company, for people who don't know, there's like a weird meme about this on the internet. It's not manly enough.
You guys ever think that, like, it's insane, like, to think like the domino effect of just a bunch of girls making a TikTok with an Australian skincare company, like, very well could have led to like this, like, just the domino effect of one little piece, right? One domino effect of them making a TikTok to my 401k is nuked and I won't get a job after graduation.
I mean, so much of history is like contingent. Like, think about like if Barack Obama had picked a different vice president, or if a few more old people in 2000 in Florida had like filled in ballots correctly, right?
Sure.
Or like even in recent memory, if I need to be very careful saying, I'm not saying this in any moral context. Don't come at me, people. I'm just saying it is very clear that history would be very different if like a bullet had moved slightly, like a few inches in a different direction, right? Like, history would be very different.
Yeah, like I'm sure you're referring to World War I if Franz Ferdinand was assassinated by a bullet in his sleeve rather than the bomb. I'm sure that's
right.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting, Armand, because like when we had you on for our first episode, it was I think about a month after the election. I think we spent a huge portion of it kind of trying to predict what Trump would do and what his first like 100 days, first year would look like. And I feel like it's been worse than pretty much any of us expected. I mean, I think like even our most like aggressive predictions of him doing everything he said on the campaign trail. I mean, even the tariffs he ran on, wasn't it mostly, it was like 10% across the board and some extra on China. It was nothing compared to like I mean, I'm sure he like in passing referenced it, but at least his like explicit platform.
His published plans were like, were 10%, which would have still been bad. But he did throughout the campaign make like insane random comments. And so it's like, yeah, it's been a lot worse than I expected, at least this quickly. It's also worse in different directions. So like, there's a lot of talk about like they were gonna like start flying like 24/7 flights, repatriation, and just deporting en masse. What they've done instead is like they had more success than they realized of like stemming people coming across the border. I think in part just because like the specter of Trump was so scary that people just like stopped trying to cross. And then they've been doing these like really awful, highly visible things where they're like shipping people who are very clearly like innocent and not convicted of any crime, and being very brazen about it, or torturing like random German tourists or like permanent residents. Um, but they haven't actually done I think frankly just because they don't have the resources, which is what they realize. Like they were yelling about Biden for like, you don't need this border bill, you can just do it. But like actually deporting criminals takes time and effort. You have to find them, catch them, ship them. A lot of countries won't take them, etc. So they're doing it on the cheap by trying to scare people, but they actually haven't done the full like almost like SS Gestapo style mobilization for that. But in terms of like economic policy, I don't know. I thought, frankly, that like Trump would just, he's always full of hot air. But my nightmare scenario was like he's just going to ride the good, accomplishments of Biden. Right, inflation was lowering. These factories were starting to come online, and I was just like super mad. I was like, "Fuck, he's going to take credit for all of this," but like he actually did something even worse.
Yeah, I wonder if we underestimated the impact of. I mean, although obviously he's talked about running for a third term again lately, but I wonder if we underestimated the impact of him being term limited and his like true belief in this tariff stuff and willingness to kind of like bite the short term.
You know what I was
like,
thinking about, honestly?
Punishment?
I don't think it's honestly a punishment thing. Like I think about this a lot. Like I think of it as like an unchained thing. Like he he gets to come in and be like, "Hey, I broke historical precedent. Like they tried to come after me." And every adult in the room, like I'm sure you guys all remember that. Like I don't know if it was Bob Woodward who reported, like it was like the trade deal with Korea that Trump was going to blow up, and like it wasn't Gary Cohn. So somebody came in the
This is
office.
Gary Cohn, and then he like
Right, yeah,
snatched off his desk. Yeah.
It's just like everybody who was the adult in the room, because my dad used to always talk about it. He was like, "Well, things are bad, right? But at least the president has a bunch of babysitters fucking keeping him being a moron." And I was like, now you have fucking Laura Loomer and like,
Yeah, I would say I feel very confidently that the people around Trump, their coherent beliefs about like the economy and politics are worse than Trump's natural inclinations if you left him in a room alone.
yeah,
I feel
absolutely.
at this point.
Well, it's like he was getting advice. I want to say it was like Oren Crass or like the
Oren
guy's name was.
Cass is
Oren
this
Cass.
lawyer who runs American Compass, which is this like MAGA think tank. They tried to like kind of like they're like we're pro worker because we're anti trade and
It's
stuff
just
like
it's like
that.
this. It's like the you remember the thing where it's like Noah Smith's we live in a kakistocracy, like the government run by the stupidest people imaginable. That's what this is. Like it's all the baskets of people, like not even like of deplorables. It's like a subset of, hey, are you the stupidest person on the planet? And you got kicked out of every job offer possible. Can you suck the king's toes hard enough that you'll stay employed? Like then the answer is yes. Come on board. Like it's.
Do you guys know how like Pete Navarro became Trump's trade advisor?
No, go ahead and rip it.
So at some point in the Trump administration, first term, I think it's either administration or the campaign, they were like, none of these economists agree with Trump's instincts on trade. Like, can't get any advisor who tells things he wants to hear. So like, let's find somebody. And he literally went to Amazon, and Pete Navarro's like anti-China trade book was like the biggest. But like Pete Navarro was a laughing stock. Nobody took him seriously. He's not. I mean, you read his book, it's like gibberish. But he was somebody who like had a book and credentials, and which agreed with what Trump said, and so they elevated him. Like the first term, there's a lot of like Trump got elected, but he mostly had former like people come up in the Republican Party had Republican ideas. But over the last several years, the Republican Party has like warped itself around him, and it's like him elevating all sorts of people who previously were in the fringes and cranks, into these high positions of power because they reflected his cringe and cringe, not cringe, it is cringe, but
It is a little cringe.
his fringe worldview.
Well, it's weird because like his worldview is like it's like oddly simplistic, and I feel like we spend a lot of time doing these mental gymnastics of like, no, guys, he wants to lower the rates so that housing can come down or whatever, like all this stupid shit. And it's like, have you considered that the guy is just kind of like a room temperature like IQ who has beef with certain people, and now he's just acting revenge? Like the thing with Colombia is like he had that like trade deal or not the trade deal, fucking with Colombia, he wanted to do the real estate deal for 400 million, and then they're like, no, man, like sorry, we don't want to do it. And now he's like, you know what, fuck your grants. Like, have we just considered he's just an impotent child or impetulant child. Like, he's just a guy throwing a temper tantrum. You don't have to do all this mental gymnastics about rationalizing what he says or what he wants.
The other thing about Peter Navarro that was funny is that it recently, I don't know if it recently came out, but I recently heard it that the economist that he referenced was a fake person in his book that was just a pseudonym of his own name. He referenced Ron Vera,
which is
who was just like a fake guy that he made out to justify his belief.
that goes further to the whole Trump found people who mirrored him. Right? Are you guys familiar with John Barron?
I feel like I haven't.
But this is amazing. This is so when Trump was in the 80s, like a real estate guy, there would be this guy named John Barron who would call up all the journalists and talk about how amazing Trump was. Oh my God, are you hearing what people are saying about Trump? And like, I have great sources that tell me that Trump did this. And he even got quoted in the paper multiple times. But every journalist in town knew that John Barron was Donald Trump. Like, he didn't even hide the voice. But he
and he named him Barron. That's hilarious.
This was before he had a child named Barron. So he named his child after his fake alter ego. And to this day, he has never publicly admitted that he did this. There's just per Trump's worldview, there's some guy named John Barron who represented him in the 80s who was mysteriously disappeared.
I think this is the best possible week to watch The Apprentice movie from last year, and I think they have that occurs in the film, and it's really, I feel like, the driving force. I mean, maybe it's dumb to base it off a movie, but for me this week it's kind of been driving how I'm interpreting Trump's actions a little bit, and just his refusal to ever admit any wrong, and frankly is just true belief in the tariffs. I mean, they're like, back then he's talking about all these trade deficits as if they are us getting ripped off. And for me, like, when you're talking about how it's so simple, he's just an idiot, like, that is the clearest example I've ever seen of that. So when he said that the trade deficit with every country needs to be 0 or positive by the end of this, that is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard him say, or just like any prominent figure. Armand, could you talk about like trade deficits and why that's a stupid way to base the tariffs on, and how that's like not the same thing as reciprocal tariffs?
Also, I go to Taco Bell often. It's delicious. I've spent a lot of money there. Taco Bell has never purchased anything for me. I have a massive trade deficit with Taco Bell. And yet, like, I don't think Taco Bell's ripping me off, right? Like, the reason we have a trade deficit with so many other countries is because we're the richest country in the world. And so we buy more from them than they sell to us. So if you look at an individual example, this idea that we should have surplus of everybody, Botswana sells us diamonds. Botswana is an incredibly poor country. They are not going to spend their money on like jet engines made in the United States or like software, SaaS software made in the United States, because they're poor. They spend it on like food and supplies where they can get them more cheaply and stuff like that. And that's not a reflection of like trade policy, just a reflection of how economic dynamics work between a really wealthy country and a poor country. And so while it is true that there are like China has for a long time done things that are kind of like shady on trade, and that they would like require us to have joint ventures with them and then steal the IP of companies that work with them. And so there's places where there are real legitimate trade grievances, and we want to address those. But the existence of a trade deficit itself being a loss doesn't make sense. The other thing is that every trade deficit is a capital surplus, which I think a lot of people don't realize, which is like, I haven't quite figured out this really simple way to say in a sentence, but like the short version of it is like, when Americans buy goods from overseas, we have to get foreign currencies to buy them. And so therefore we sell dollars. In order therefore there to be, why do people buy dollars? Some of it's like they want to, Ecuador uses the dollar and stuff like that. But primarily they buy dollars because they want to either purchase things from the United States, so our exports, or because we have, we have fewer exports than imports, we have a surplus deficit, they're investing in the United States, right? Like, and so a trade deficit, the mirror of it is a capital surplus. People want to invest in the United States because we're the richest country in the world, the best business environment in the world, well, until recently. most people, if they want to just like have a safe investment around the world, they would invest in the United States because he knew that the stock market over time grow, our economy wasn't going to implode. There's not like when you're investing in overseas in other countries, there's a real risk that like a coup happens and then just like the company you owned gets taken by Putin and you get nothing. Right. And so that is really the issue. Going back to actually, though, about Trump being dumb, I think one thing that Republicans have kind of part of the reason there's this whole like trust the plan mentality, even amongst politicians, is like Trump has consistently done things in the political arena that all of these people thought were crazy and it worked out for him. Some of it's like a coincidence that worked out for him. Like, I genuinely think like a non-insane candidate, like even like a Ron DeSantis would have done much better against Kamala than Trump. But some of it's like his, like in 2016, the crazy awful things he said about immigration were able to get those things in the headline, made them salient. And for the, like the white working class voters in like those areas, like if you looked afterwards, like immigration was a huge issue for them. And so I think a lot of Republican politicians have like, it's like, he's got to have some deep wisdom, you know, like that I don't understand, but like every time I think it doesn't make sense, it works out. And I think he has good political instincts. But that doesn't mean he like is an omnipotent genius about everything, but he thinks that.
Political versus policy for sure. And like the idea that this is somehow going to save like steel jobs in Ohio because it makes no sense. And like I feel like it's just so explicitly makes no sense that like I mean we're seeing like Ben Shapiro, all these right-wing people who aren't just pure loyalists or trust the plan of this omnipotent genius, like they are all turning on it. I mean I saw someone, Nate Silver had a great tweet where he said it reminds him of the Luka trade. Like, unless you're literally working for Nico Harrison's front office, like it's just so obviously on its face ridiculous that it's impossible to defend for any like non-insane or in a cult person.
The thing though, Shapiro, though, you mentioned him, he had an initial take was like, this is really dumb. And then he's like, well, I listened to Besant and he explained this complicated like, strategy where they have to thread the needle where they're trying to like lower interest rates. And it's like, I think a lot of smart people who don't, especially if you're like as prominent as Shapiro, it's like very bad for your business to be like stridently anti-Trump. They have to find ways to like reconcile it mentally, so they come up with these try to believe these complicated schemes. But if you even step back from those things, like the whole Besant strategy of like, oh, this will allow us to roll over our debt at lower rates. It's like if you're planning to reduce interest rates is to nuke the economy, it doesn't matter that your interest rates are lower and refinancing the debt is cheaper because you have no tax revenue. It's like being like, well, you know, I can, I wouldn't even work in business because if you like nuked your revenues, you wouldn't get cheaper loans. So that analogy doesn't work, but it's just dumb.
I burned my house down, but at least I get the insurance money.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a good analogy. Yeah.
But you have no house. I love it because this is my favorite mental activity is to do the mental gymnastics of what could they possibly be thinking about, and then eventually you just go, no, it's just stupid. Like just it's great. It's like a never ending puzzle of like trying to puzzle piece of the rates and rolling the debt, and then no.
I mean, Trump reposted the TikTok on his Truth Social that explicitly said the goal was to cause a recession, and then whatever comes after, I forget what his stupid claim was, but he explicitly said the goal is to first cause a recession. So I saw Peter Navarro, like, didn't he promise no recession today? So they're not quite on the same page apparently, but
it's great because like you have like what was it? The S&P's down like 15% or something like that. Like this is single-handedly just like every morning you wake up and it's like new drop of whoever's like stock market or like the Japanese stock market. They had to put the circuit breaker in place because so many trades were happening or something like that. And it's like I have a buddy who wants to go into finance, right? After Trump won, he was like, "Oh, but like it'll be good for the market," and I was like, "It's not gonna be good. Just wait until he does his little tariff shit." But we're kind of forgetting like all of this is about like stability, right? Like even if he had said like, "Oh, like fuck it, we're doing like 10% blanket tariffs," at least that's like predictable, right? Like don't wave on it. It's the unpredictability that's killing everybody, and like a part of you wants to go like I'm just gonna become the Joker. That's all I'm saying. I'm just gonna become the Joker. Like I can't with this shit anymore.
Well, predictability. It's funny. I'm older than you guys. I remember the Obama era, and the big thing Republicans would hammer is like Obama introducing new regulations is causing business uncertainty and it's bad. And it's like, yeah, remember all that? Like
It's
now
just, oh my God.
like even
Yeah.
if you think Trump has a plan by not telling anybody the plan, like he's created massive uncertainty. Like nobody knows what's going on.
So I have a question. So I think I've seen a take that to me seems probably correct, that the market still doesn't really believe that Trump is going to keep the tariffs for a substantial amount of time. So what kind of and well, just like my general really uninformed intuition is that like the economic impact of all of this, if it does continue, is really like it's not reflected in the level that the markets have decreased. So what kind of event is necessary for the markets to really believe that this is going to be a long haul type of deal that's really going to impact the economy? Like what do the people on Wall Street need to see for them to believe that this is something that companies are actually going to have to reconcile with? Even though it seems like most people, there's been numerous reports that um, companies are taking this seriously. Like I saw like 28% of like cross-Atlantic shipping, they're like already canceling it immediately, regardless of what happens. So like, I feel like that reality is not showing up necessarily in Wall Street. So what is it going to take for them to believe that?
I think there's going to be like a series of events like on Wednesday when these things actually hit. That'll be like the first thing because that's really a test of like, is he actually going to do it? And so there are a lot of people still
it's
think
just the 10% across the board right now, correct? And then
yeah,
it's
the
like
reciprocal
all the fake numbers.
the fake
okay.
then the we'll make sure the penguins really like get it.
Yeah,
We're sticking it.
I've seen so many things on my TikTok. Like my TikTok has been half penguins marching to go negotiate tariffs with Trump, which has been really funny.
That was a real own goal on their part because it's like it gave this a really funny visual.
Yeah.
And it like got it to break through to like, economic policy is like complicated, so it's like hard to get it onto like normal social media and TikTok. But like the penguins it's funny.
Yeah,
It's so
it's
stupid.
something that's broken through to like everybody in like my generation that they understand.
Yeah, it's absolutely broken. Like everyone is just casually talking about it and casually blaming Trump. I mean, I think it's like very much Trump's tariffs like have entered the discourse, and like even normies understand like, oh, this is 100% Trump. This is like exclusively his decision, and he's the cause of it. So
Can you guys send me those TikToks? Because like I don't have the app anymore. Like I feel like I'm the only Zoomer like left out of my generation. Dude, like my
I don't
brother,
check it very often, but I'll try to find some.
that's so funny. Actually, just like where they just, like, penguins like marching like on like the White House,
or like people doing AI pictures of like penguins
Yeah.
negotiating trade deals.
Yeah.
that's hilarious. That is actually so funny.
Another kind of question I had as someone who is very economically illiterate is like how can any like trade will any trade with at all happen with China if there's actually 104% tariffs? Like how does any company reconcile with like 104% tariffs? Like how does that work with anyone's margins?
It basically doesn't. It's like at that level it makes, which would be, I know a lot of people want to decouple from China. I think it's unrealistic to entirely decouple from like the world's at this point biggest economy, depending how you measure, like we can trade back and forth. But I think the smarter play is to like try to decouple from industries that might be vulnerable if we ever go to war, like semiconductor chips.
And I heard we like 87% of our antibiotics or something come from China, which like surprised me.
And that's like something where it's like, oh, we should try to like trade more with allies and to build resilience.
Man, that's crazy. It sounds like he's almost saying if we just strengthened our trade with allies and built things in America,
incentivize domestic industries like the IRA. Trump is also like if you were trying to do what Trump wanted, he would be like saying like the IRA is amazing. Let's do IRA times 3, 2.0.
Dude, it's my favorite thing. So I'm like, sometimes people be like, yeah, we gotta do like they'll list like Trump's agenda, right? Like retail manufacturing or fucking whatever. And I'm like, oh, so what if we put like some incentives, right? Maybe like we gave them some money and said, hey, but you should build this here. Or they're like, oh, like the rates. I'm like, okay, well, what if we built more houses, so they're cheaper, and so you wouldn't have to worry about the overall cost. Like it's
He's kind of taking the dumb lefty position on a lot of these things. I mean, people have made the Maoist Trump joke, but like I remember some left NIMBYs will like make the claim of like, oh, all this like supply stuff is meaningless. It's all about interest rates, as if that's not just like part of the market inherently, and quick like rapidly killing the economy to get lower interest rates isn't going to like cause a bunch of.
Well, if you want to talk about like reshoring supply chains, right? The basic math of it versus China, right, is that we have a fourth of their population. There's a really interesting piece. I'll send you guys a link later about like why is China so dominant in solar, and a lot of it is like just sheer economy of scale. When you have giant cities and you have 1.3 billion people, you can just scale on a level that a country of 330 million people cannot, which means that if you want to build like resilient supply chains that are immune from a competitor in key strategic industries, then you need to do it scale up through allies, right? We need to have closer trade ties with Canada and Japan and South Korea and all those other countries. And instead, we're pursuing the opposite approach, breaking our trade relations with them and pushing them closer to China. And as for like domestic, trying to specifically make things domestically, like semiconductor chips in particular are really vulnerable because they're primarily made in Taiwan. And they're so foundational to like so much technology and computers and all that. And that's why we had the CHIPS Act under Biden, and it was very successful. We were able to, I think there's more things we could have done on the regulatory side to make it easier, but we still built like the first advanced like semiconductor manufacturing factory in the US in a long time with TSMC in Arizona. This stuff is doable, but not the way Trump's going about it.
Oh, sure. Well, it's like, I'm sure you've seen the thing where it's like I want to say it's like their new BYD, like electric vehicle factories. It's like, those things are like the size of like my city. Like for context, I live in Santa Barbara. Their fucking factories to make electric vehicles are the size of like my city, right? They have like hundreds of thousands of people working in these factories. So it's like, we can't compete with that, right? If we only have 330 million people, but there's a really good solution. We got some people north in Canada. We got some people down south in Mexico. Like, we built a bigger supply chain with our allies. Except instead, how about we just piss them off and start like tariff war with them? I feel like it's like living in just again idiocracy. Like, I'm sure you guys remember that movie from the early 2000s.
Yeah.
It's literally just like the dumbest thing imaginable. It's like, oh, compete with China. Okay, we need more people, more bodies.
Don't we just like not have the workforce basically to do like most of this too without like, if we wanted to manufacture so many just like less complex goods, our unemployment is between like 3 and 4%. Like, where are these workers going to come from?
Well, and also like these workers are like, they're people that like, again, when we talk about like comparative advantage and stuff, right? Like, if you want to have reshore manufacturing the way like JD Vance and these people want, like 1950 style, it's like, okay, great. But does that mean you want to take like Silicon Valley away from making like AI and send them to go like make socks? Like, if you want that, that's fine. Like, that's cool. Do you want me to stop personal training and go make fucking Nike blazers? Like, I can do that.
It's that Dave Chappelle bit people were reposting. And also, like, Armand, you were talking about the uncertainty. I think it's important to lay out too that, like, let's assume, although we can't really assume because they've said like 50 goals, but let's assume the goal is to reshore American manufacturing, or at least that's one goal. The uncertainty of it makes that impossible, because why would any American company decide right now to like build a new factory in the US because of these tariffs if they have no idea if the tariffs are going to be there in 6 months, and then it wouldn't have made sense in the first place? Like, there's no certainty here that would cause them to actually like make rational choices based off the policy.
Well, so I have a couple of buddies who work in the manufacturing industry. A friend of mine is like a founder of like a small manufacturing startup. And I asked him, actually, I was like, okay, I always want to sanity check myself. Like, I was like, are any manufacturers being like, yeah, great, like we can protect it? And he's like, no one, even the like Trumpier ones are just kind of like not commenting, like, trust the plan, whatever, we'll figure it out. But nobody is like, oh shit, I'm building, like setting up investments for new factories. And a bunch of folks I heard indirectly from them, like, manufacturing people went to DC, spoke to the White House, and said, if you do this, you have to give us a clear commitment that this tariffs will stay in place for the rest of your presidency. And they weren't even willing to give that. And it's like, it takes a long time to build a factory, right? It's a big, complicated, expensive thing. But to go back to the iPhones thing, I think it's a little, the Dave Chappelle bit is funny, but I think like place where we as Democrats kind of sometimes screw up the messaging is we imply that like Americans are too good to do these tough jobs or whatever. And it's more that um, as countries get more advanced economically, they move up the value chain. And so, for example, Boeing, there's a recent chart somebody did where they're like, all the parts of a Boeing plane, so many of them come from different countries. Um, but who makes most of the money off of selling a Boeing plane? It is not their suppliers, it's Boeing. Because the most difficult and complicated and advanced part of building a Boeing is assembling and designing and selling those parts, selling the plane, right? And so it's not like that. It's like I'm like, oh, it's beneath me to work. Like I want those poor people to work those jobs. It's that that's why trade is good. It's a mutually beneficial exchange. I get to move up the value chain. Like we've already got, we started off like simpler manufacturing. We get to do advanced manufacturing. We'll make more money. But also the person from a country that's previously agrarian had to work on a brutal farm and make no money, subsistence wages all day. Like the best jobs in those communities are working for international factory. They usually have like, again, I think sweatshops, we need protections, all of that. I'm not saying like those are good things, but they're consistently the best and safest jobs that are available in some of the poorest countries on earth. And people fight desperately to get them so they can therefore move further up the value chain and become more advanced. This is the first time I've seen a country that is explicitly saying, I want people to work less and higher paying, more advanced jobs in terms of value add and move down the value chain. This is like the great leap backwards.
Yeah. Like I've seen so many people saying, "Oh, the tens of thousands of federal workers are the perfect candidates to be first in the new textile factories," and it's like, okay, but then we're just gonna have a lesser GDP, lesser tax base, worse infrastructure, and worse education, and go into a spiral of just becoming a lesser country that technically has a higher manufacturing output, but is just measurably poor. We have to give up our standards of living and just like not be like a top economy anymore. Which I don't know why anybody would want to do that, but.
Well, it's like the econ 101 of like I want to say it's you can only like grow in a couple different ways where it's like more people, more land, more like resources, or like you can refine those things, and like we have to refine those goods for an advanced economy. Like we can mine like fucking cobalt if we want. Someone else could mine it. We can pay them to do it, and then we ship it here, and we can make it into something, and then ship it somewhere else, and then they can refine it, and then 10 steps later, it's like a semiconductor that does all this magic. Like it's not like that. Like that. I'm sure I don't know if you guys seen that one too, where it was like, how would buying glasses work under like anarchy or something? I'm not just gonna be able to these lights.
Just find someone who likes making glasses.
I made a post about that. I was like, hey, I need uranium-235 for the local power plant near my house in order to have power. Hey, I like refining uranium-235. I'll give it to you. Thanks. See, it's so simple. Why do you doubt the incredible talent and human nature of our society?
It's so funny that this has now become like a right-wing thing.
I know. Like, I feel like I'm in like bizarro world because I feel like so much of what I'm seeing from the right wing is kind of like half-baked takes out to like during the Democratic primary from the most progressive people about
the American public just needs to check their privilege and accept lower wages. I mean, like material goods are overrated.
Yeah. It's a bizarre world when like you're like sitting there like advocating to like your significant other. You're like, no, babe, you wouldn't get it. Like we actually need to cut like spending and raise taxes, but that's not what's happening right now. Like no, like but that's what we should do, but that's not what's happening right now. I feel like I sound like an 80s Republican when I talk to my girlfriend. I'll be like, well, no. Like that is a problem, right? And we should try to pay that down. And everything they're saying is correct. Like we should try to pay it down. But that's not what they're doing. So like that doesn't matter. But what I'm saying is real, and that's what it's like. It's living in a bizarre world.
The whole thing about like, like these decadent Western, fancy trinkets. Like you don't need that. Go back and work in the factory. Also coming from like fucking podcasters and YouTube hosts, like no offense to podcasters, you guys are great, but if you started going around telling other people that their jobs are too soft and they need to work in the mines, like
like they've become suddenly like radical Marxists. They're saying like if you have a 3-figure or 6-figure like information sector job, you need to give that up in order for someone who is working like a $15 service job in the Midwest can have a 22 an hour factory job. Like that's like I feel like the most basic premise of this, and it's literally just like you need to like accept that your sector of the economy has to end, and you need to go work in the factory so then other people can go like work in
Learn
the
to code,
factories.
but
So then we can no, we
To
can't.
sue.
Coding is too decadent. We can't code
the
anymore.
dark version of that.
No,
Yeah.
it's
You need
learn
to,
to
like,
sue,
learn to
learn
mend.
to mine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The joke.
Like,
It was a Minecraft movie.
Well, what was I going to say? It's like it's not actually even Marxist really, because Marx very famously was against protectionism. He wrote whole
yeah.
things about how
Yeah.
mercantilism
I
is
just
bad and
I just
trade
came
is
across
good.
this post. Yeah.
And it's actually just like anarchist tradition of like small
Uh-huh.
anarchist communities, and like how like or Maoist, where like Mao
Yeah.
famously sent like intellectuals back into the fields.
Yeah.
Um,
Pol Pot.
and it's very funny. There's a story where Jane Fonda met I think it was Jane Fonda, some Hollywood actress met Deng Xiaoping, and she's like, oh, my father once told me that he went to this field and he talked to a professor who was working in the farms who said, well, I used to do like scientific research, but now my life is better because I'm working in the fields and supporting my nation and understanding like the struggle. And Deng Xiaoping's like, he was fucking lying. She was like crushed by this. Like, he was fucking lying, right?
Yup.
He was like amazed. He was like, you guys fell for our propaganda? Like, serious?
I'm just like shocked by the way in which like the right has so suddenly shifted to asking Americans to like give up premises of like kind of the American dream that have been like core to like the Republican Party and even Trumpism until I feel like the past few months, basically until it's politically convenient. Like obviously they were very much in favor or against even slight price increases so you could have the maximum value from your wealth and everything. So how what is gonna what is it gonna take? I guess this is an open question for uh the public to like really reconcile with this in either elections or polling beyond like the few point drops that we've seen. I mean, obviously it's very early. If we reach a recession, there's huge. There's like also inflation, mass job layoffs. I guess we'll see it then. But I'm kind of worried because like you know my parents' savings needs a big political repudiation in order to be saved. So very central concern to me, I guess.
Yeah, I actually would curious to ask you guys, because it feels almost like this switch went over where it's like they're all talking about the cost of living, and then now they're talking about like you need to sacrifice for the glory of whatever. As like young men who like know people maybe who are your age who are like right leaning or independent, like has any have you seen people kind of flipping like that, or is it just like just a political class has flipped on a switch for this?
Personally speaking, I know absolutely no people at all. Like the biggest sense that I get from the people around me of like any ideological basis is like things are hard enough as is for like young people, like frustration over like internships, like college finances, housing, like the appetite for sacrifice monetarily is absolutely completely zero. Um, and maybe it's because I do go to a very like liberal university, but even the people I know who are very conservative, like their employment prospects are impacted by everything. It's like there's like you could probably I don't I feel like if you were to do polling on how much you're willing to sacrifice for your nation, it would be like the least among Gen Z, regardless of ideology. I'm sure conservative people would be higher, but it would be like really, really low. Which I mean, that's reflected, I feel like, in a number of things. Like, I mean, I feel like I recently saw a bunch of polls showing like the percentage of people willing to fight for the country in Europe, and some countries are as low as like 20% or less. So I think it's just that young people, and I guess more can be patriotic, but sacrifice, especially like in this time, is not at all appetizing. So
Well, and it would
Yeah.
help if it's not a stupid sacrifice that's actually like bringing no benefits too.
yeah, like
I'd say, yeah,
if we were being invaded, that would be a lot of different things. This is like, do you want to light $10 on fire to make somebody happy? Like that's kind of
yeah.
Like-
I'd say for me, like with my frat, like I feel like the soft Trump supporters, like the true believers, I think like the ones I talked to, he literally had lost thousands of dollars in the week and was like, it had to be done. like it'll work out, like Trump will figure it out. So, but I think the soft Trump supporters, the kind of like barstool type of Trump supporter, who like isn't fully into the cult of personality stuff, is kind of like, bro, what is Trump doing? Like I've seen a lot of memes where like, this bro is not a deal maker. Like I think it's just kind of, I don't know that they've fully turned on him, but I think they're kind of like, what is he doing?
Yeah.
Like this is crazy. But I mean, I don't know how many of those there are, but I do think it's enough to like win an election. So we'll see.
I think there's also a question of like salience, even in terms of approval, if it was consistent, because in Trump's first term, a lot of his negative approval was driven by, I don't want to say superficial issues, but like kind of like the vibes he brought in, like unprofessionality and just like abrasiveness. Whereas now, like if you look at say -6% in the beginning of his last term versus now, his like he's most approved of for his like issues where his personality come into play, or like that brashness, or even, you know, although unconstitutional and really horrible in a number of ways, he's relatively approved of on immigration. But you know, inflation and price increases matter a lot more to people. So maybe through like the I don't know, not the devolution, but the way that like, you know, that approval is constructed in various issues, although it's very similar, because the economy is like so low and just getting lower, that may actually, even though it's not affecting his overall performance in the same way, it may mean that a lot of his like more soft disapprovals are actually pretty hard because they're based out of like economic considerations. Maybe, I don't know, that's maybe my little,
it's kind of the reverse of what I feel like the median voters take on Trump was, which was like nostalgic for his first term, because it was like, yeah, he was crazy, he kind of did stupid crazy stuff, but I mean, he handled the economy well. Remember how good the economy was? And it's really been the inverse of like, I mean,
it's like
obviously
he's
has
crazy sometimes, but he doesn't manage the economy. And
yeah, like, I mean, maybe like in their minds he's even toned down the crazy, because like kind of the resist energy for propping up every crazy thing he does is gone. But
I think also there's going to be a big difference between like, if today he was like, I'm giving up, this is all I'm done, or more realistic, he'd be like, I won, like they all conceded, da da da, and it's all reverse. Market will probably mostly recover. There's going to be permanent damage anyway, just because of the uncertainty it's created. Because like at any point he could try to do it again. So there's going to be like broken trade relationships, different investments. Part of what actually I wanted to say earlier about trade, I think people really need to understand, is like the reason that domestic goods become more expensive, even if you impose tariffs, is people think it's driven by like competition, and there's some of it, right? There's like less competition for goods, they can raise their prices. The primary reason is because it has to displace other higher value economic uses. So if you think about like wine, if we banned all wine production, or ban all foreign sales of wine, American wine would get really expensive, because in order to supply that demand, you would have to convert other farmland that's not as good for wine, or maybe it's not in a good location, or it's hard to transport. And so the costs of that go up. And so those costs of tariffs, those sorts of costs, like costs that aren't immediately obvious, but just like having to shift around and adjust for this risk, it's going to be permanent. I think if like he does actually stick through it, people start getting fired, losing their jobs. You start seeing prices going way up in the stores. Then I think it's going to like cut through like those soft Trump supporters, because yeah, you're right. Like he was sustained by a lot by this, like, well, he's crazy, but like things were fine. What is it? Some mean tweets, you know? And now it's like the craziness very obviously and very directly is fucking people over.
Yep, I agree. And I'd like to, if we could transition a little bit, I think, I mean, we've talked a little bit about it, but the political fallout of this, like some of what we expect in the years to come as a result of this. We've talked about how this could like represent some sort of realignment, how like Trump's using some of these like kind of anarchisty framing devices. But I'd be curious to talk about like some of the winners and losers of this. For me, I think one winner for sure, I saw Matt Iglesias was doing a bit of a well-deserved victory lap on this, is I think Chuck Schumer's decision has aged pretty well to kind of postpone the big fight and kind of allow Democrats to back out of the view for a bit and let Trump kind of blow everything up until we had a better reason to fight him on more favorable terrain. So I think he's definitely has come off looking pretty good from it. Another thing that I think would be interesting to discuss is I feel like a big winner from this, or at least she thinks she's a big winner, is Kamala. I think all the clips of her talking about the tariffs during the election and how it was going to cause a recession by the middle of next year, that combined with the HHS guide declaring for California governor, I am definitely starting to think that she thinks she can win if she runs again, and I think that's where she's thinking. So I don't know, Armand, do you feel like there's any obvious like winners and losers from this tariff fight besides like America as a loser?
Well, I'd say within sort of the Democratic Party, we have sort of a couple interesting dynamics going on. So Schumer, for example, I think the reason that ended up being like the smart play in retrospect, I was like uncertain of it at the time. Right now, if there was a government shutdown, the full like messaging apparatus of the Trump administration would be that the government shutdown is causing the market to lose confidence. And then the press would report it. And then, they write somewhere in there like, well, it's most likely because of tariffs, but it would muddy the waters. This is so obviously owned by Trump. And you're not even having these bullshit debates of like them pretending it's something else. And so it makes it very clear who's causing it. I think the interesting thing of like, I don't know who's going to win or lose, but the interesting subcurrent is this like, there's a protectionist faction in the Democratic Party. You saw Sean Fain, head of UAW, basically like come out defending like the auto tariffs, but like he phrased it in a way that was like not very, like if you go down to the paragraphs, he's like, oh, well, the way Trump did it is reckless, but these tariffs are good. Like you really kind of like did not come out like full force of like Trump's tariffs are bad and destructive, and actually like spread a lot of like things that are frankly not true. Like he talked about like NAFTA being the reason that America deindustrialized. If you look at a chart, which I've reposted a zillion times, like manufacturing employment as a percentage of employment for the United States basically started to decline after World War II. It just steadily declined because automation and the rest of the world wasn't blown up forever. And so like, but there's that faction, and you can see them really trying to find their footing because they're like really afraid that this is going to make like the free trade doctrines and ideas really dominant in the party. And they felt like during the Biden administration, they were really winning. Like there's this whole project funded by the Hewlett Foundation that was called like Get Beyond Neoliberalism, right? And they built this, they funded a lot of places, including what we mentioned earlier, Orrin Cass from the American Compass Project. Like they funded him because they wanted, was like a MAGA guy, because they wanted to basically like promote these like free trade is bad. We need to like have better like industrial policy and protection. We can do smart tariffs. And then the Roosevelt Institute, which was like pretty much the think tank that provided a lot of like the policy framework for the Biden administration. There was this alliance between the security hawks on China who wanted protectionism for strategic reasons with like sort of like the left-leaning like anti-free trade people. And so they built like intellectual edifice where it's like free trade protectionism is not just good because it's resilient against China. It can actually like protect the working class and stuff like that. And what happened is like, Trump has now really made the Democratic Party, if you look at our voters, like the most free trade they've ever been. Like it's like 90%. Like when a couple months ago, even before all this, like for the first time, I think in like my lifetime, like NAFTA was like very positively seen by most Democrats, even though historically Democratic candidates have always been like NAFTA is this original sin. And so I think that faction of the party is really feeling like they're kind of on the ropes right now. And some of them have even said like openly, like, oh, I don't like how the new liberals are like so smug about like tariffs being bad. Like, here's ways we can do good tariffs. And they're really fighting. And that's like, I am trying to encourage people to take the fight to them too, because it's like, there's no like, it is true that there are smart, strategic, individual instances to do tariffs for like strategic goals, but this idea that tariffs are an economic benefit is just not true. They're always a cost because they divert from the most like high value uses of capital and labor. Sometimes that cost is worth paying, but it is always a cost. And the idea that you create a perpetual motion machine where like by tariffing and doing protectionism, you'll spur an industry and that'll create more jobs and so on is just not proven by the data. Like consistently,
Yeah.
they cost more jobs than they save, they increase more costs, etc. I think that's the most interesting sort of like fight going on. I don't know who's like
Mhm.
fully won or fully lost, but you can clearly tell that like the protectionist wing feels on the back foot, which if I were them, I'd ask myself, like, if someone is doing like the full throated vision of what I want and it's a disaster, maybe I should reconsider what I want.
Yeah, I think they're right to be worried. I mean, I don't think there's any path to like a Democratic candidate being pro-tariff in the fallout of this right now. I just couldn't see that happening. I think it's like too high salience of an example to point to, and I think it would like. I mean, people were hyping up Sean Faines as a 28 candidate. I think that put the death nail in it. I mean, and I mean, maybe this is my own personal interest taking over here, but I wonder if this sort of offers a bit of an opening for the abundance stuff a little bit, because I think this is kind of the
Yeah.
perfect counterexample. I mean, me and Max are planning to we're gonna do a big abundance episode. We're both on the
Oh, right
last few
on.
chapters.
Nice.
But I wonder, because I mean, I think that the worldview behind these tariffs represents such a scarcity mindset of like there's a pie and we're getting ripped off, and like the slice of the pie metaphor that that Ezra like cuts down at the beginning. And so I wonder, I mean, maybe not directly. I don't think voters are going to be like, great, oh well, this reminds me of that abundance book. But I wonder
Right.
if it like those ideas are kind of an opening for Democrats, especially going into 2028, to kind of run on like, no, we don't have to live in this scarce world. We can have it all. We can have an abundant mindset, and then obviously like run on all the planks of the book. But what do you think of that? I mean, is it too much? Just I'm into the book, and obviously I'm thinking of
You
it, or
know,
do you think that like really is a bit of an opening for them?
I think the book is having really, really, really big impact. Not just with all the media appearances, but you can see it in like sort of the backlash where people are like taking it seriously as a threat to sort of like
Mm-hmm.
their ideological worldview. And I like anecdotally, like I live in like San Francisco in Pacific Heights. It's a nice area. I go to the JCC to work out, and like I saw like a random woman like carrying it into the gym. like, like this book is like getting out there. It's in every bookstore. I've heard through the grapevine that like it is likely to be like in the top slots for the New York Times best-selling list, which is like really huge for a politics
My
book.
86-year-old grandmother is a massive MSNBC fan and watches Maddow every night. And she texted me about the book and then was listening to the audiobook from it, just from their MSNBC appearances, and was like, "This is brilliant! It's the Democrats' future." She's
Yeah.
86 years old and lives in a old Prop 13 protected
Wow.
Menlo Park house. If it's getting to her, I think that's a pretty good sign.
Yeah. Well, and so I think the two things that kind of like stand out to me is that one is that just like the basic uh premise of like abundance versus scarcity, right? Like um there's a world in which you think that you can only gain if you hurt other people. Abundance is very much like let's grow the pie. And so like while free trade and trade issues were not like really that big a topic in the book, it's Derek Thompson, I was did a recent appearance and he just specifically said that like this
Oh, he was
is like
brilliant on CNN,
yeah,
CNBC.
he was he did this like big rant, and but I'm talking about a different appearance he had later where he explicitly somebody asked him about this and he's like, while abundance or book was not explicitly about trade, it's very much like right-wing degrowth is this like anti-trade thing, right? It's like a zero sum. Every trade we do with other people means they're ripping us off, versus the abundance world is like it's not just about like taking or giving, it's about like growing and creating opportunities for everybody. Which leads to the second thing is that like for a long time after the election, there's this argument on the left that we need to center economic populism. In terms of what that means in economics, I feel like it's kind of slippery. People define a zillion different things. But in terms of rhetoric, it's like sort of this fight oligarchy thing that Bernie was doing. And I think there's an element to that. But I think it shows like that it's not always about like what helps the rich screws the poor. Like that cannot be your only
Mm-hmm.
analysis because this tariff policy is hurting everybody.
Yeah.
Right. And like I think this mindset where like you can only think of things of like the only problems in the world can be ones where are caused by like corporate oligarchs. It's true for many things, but there are also problems caused by like NIMBY homeowners. There are problems caused by like people who don't want solar plants near them. There are problems caused by like well-intentioned bureaucrats who think that we should write a bunch of rules that create a bunch of litigation because they're terrified of potentially something going wrong and not thinking of the cost and environment of doing that, right? Like the world is a big and complex place. There's more than one lens through which to analyze politics. And abundance, like I think, particularly addresses that within the party of saying like we need a bigger lens. And this trade thing is a great example. It's like the right wing is actually adopting the left wing rhetoric of like, of course it's hurting Wall Street, so it must be good for like truckers. I was like, you think truckers are going to do well when like global trade shuts down?
Really difficult for people to, I feel like, wrestle with the idea that everybody can be hurt by something, specifically relating to like the stock market, is like, especially when people are saying like, oh, so like now you care about the wealthy because they hold like, the vast majority of the stock market. It's like, well, no, actually everybody can be hurt by like things, and just because you don't own stock doesn't mean this won't affect you. And it's like everybody's so focused on like punitive measures for problems rather than just I feel like, I don't know, I think it's very kind of just thinking like long term. I wonder if this will make just the kind of political ecosystem maybe a little less like punitive and so focused on retribution, because we're trying in full force ideas of retribution and punishment for others. So
I hope so.
I actually thought Ben Shapiro, he did an interview with Ezra Klein, and he had a sort of interesting connection to abundance that I hadn't thought of he was comparing the everything bagel liberalism that Ezra talks about, like where for our listeners who haven't heard Ezra talk about that, it's like Democrats, for example, in the IRA bill for the solar charging stations for electric vehicles, they would put regulations that attempted to solve other goals, like trying to hire underrepresented groups through your contractors or things like that. But he was comparing it to the tariff, saying that this is kind of the everything bagel conservatism, where there's like 10 different goals that they're talking about, where it's like, we're trying to reshore American manufacturing, but also we're these trade deficits, and also like we need to apparently protect workers in third world countries who are like being exploited. Like there's like so many different goals at play here that clearly none of them are really being achieved. I don't know what much to conclude off of that, but I thought it was an interesting comparison to the book.
I mean, what I'm thinking of is like there are political groups are always like coalitions, right? And you try to make elements of your coalition happy. But when you try to make all of them happy at the same time, it eventually, if you don't make choices, it weighs down the whole project. And a similar thing is with like the way that protectionism usually works is there's an industry that's politically influential and they can win protection for themselves. But it's reliant on like everybody else not getting it, right? Because like the economy has to function. And so they make it function a little bit shittier for everybody at like a big gain for them. But Trump's tariffs are like if you like gave into every rent seeker in the economy simultaneously. And like if everybody's a rent seeker, the whole edifice collapses, right? Like the host dies. And so it's again, another example of where it's like simply looking at things of like good guy and bad guy doesn't work in politics, because this is just public choice theory, which is very basic, like the idea of there are some things that really benefit a small group of people and represent like a diffuse cost for everybody that's larger, but then like they're all getting it at once, and so the diffuse cost is exploded, the whole thing falls apart.
Definitely.
yeah, that's something, especially in Michigan, I focus a lot just on like population growth. That's a big thing that everybody talks about in like Michigan state politics, is like how do we prevent brain drain, build an information economy, but then nobody actually wants to do it. Like Republicans don't want to do it because they're too committed to like corporate welfare. But then something that is coming up is that Democrats in Michigan have a difficult time wrestling the need for an information economy with the union workforce and everything. Something my worry for specific. Sorry, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I think it kind of comes back to these ideas, especially ones that Republicans now are proposing, is that there's eventually going to be a time where almost all luckily the UAW is diversifying, for instance, but so many of their workers, their jobs are going to be replaced by automation, and then union protections won't prevent you when you don't have any leverage over automakers. When GM one day says, I mean, just because I think automation is going to keep increasing, going to say, theoretically, with the 10% remaining number of your workforce, you could strike, but that's not going to do anything for us because we can automate 90% of you. And so, obviously, the UAW is going to try their best to ensure that they can have as many of their workers stay in the workforce for as long as possible. But at some point, those jobs are probably not going to exist due to automation. And so, um, I it's a difficult question because, especially in the Midwest, unions are such a part the of the Democratic Party, and this is wanting the best for all people because that point is going to come, but it's a very difficult thing to wrestle with politically, especially when um, Republicans are offering policies that reportedly will help unions directly, but are damaging them. So I think that we're going to see a lot of change with coalitions in terms of organized labor because of this, especially because the UAW has come out in full force with the tariffs, which is just it's really difficult kind of to understand where things are going for the Democratic Party's coalition in Michigan specifically.
I mean, I think the reason that Europe has a lot of problems, obviously, but one of the things that
Yeah.
Europe does better, particularly the Nordic countries, is that they have sectoral bargaining.
Sectoral bargaining.
And so
Yeah.
instead of, which is the idea that, for the audience, instead of bargaining collectively with individual unions of individual companies, you have entire sectors of the economy. And so those unions in general tend to be much more pro automation. Europe, for example, if you go on the trains, European trains have way less staff and crew. There's a lot more automatic trains, but everybody has lots of jobs because they have way more trains. And you can take instead of being I need to hold on and prevent progress by preserving these jobs for these people. If you are negotiating collective benefits for everybody in the sector or large part of the economy, you can say okay, we'll automate this away, and then the gains will allow us to expand more production, and they can do these jobs because ultimately all automation hasn't if you told somebody in 1930 about all the automation we'd have today, they'd be like, who has a job? We automated everything.
Yep.
Right? But it creates new opportunities for jobs. But the incentives aren't really aligned. I don't blame labor unions individually for being afraid of automation because the way it's set up now,
decisions.
Right?
No, definitely.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. So many people I feel especially with organized, not them, but the discussions I've had with people is conflating blame with just a realization. It's nobody's necessarily acting against anyone else. It's just they want to preserve their own jobs for as long as possible, and it's a difficult thing to deal with. But I'll add sectoral bargaining to the list of ballot initiatives and constitutional amendments by a ballot initiative I have to get done in Michigan in my lifetime. So
we already have that in California for fast food, and the result of it has been that turnover in fast food has decreased. It's not fully formal, but it's a food council. It's it's a complicated thing. Turnover has decreased. Wages have increased. Costs have slightly increased of fast food. How much is because of this is not clear, but overall, there's been you've been able to shift a lot of the ideal bargaining scenario is that you shift relative income from management and shareholders to the workers, but not actually hurt the company as a collective entity. It seems to be working so far, so I think that's a promising experiment to look at.
it really makes me wish that in Michigan, for instance, because we don't have as many ballot initiatives remotely as California because we have very stringent restrictions, that people who cared about implementing good policy would invest in organizations that could promulgate those ballot initiatives rather than just state legislative races. Because if you picked your three biggest issues and got them on the ballot, they would probably pass, and that would do as much good as three consecutive Democratic trifectas would do.
I'm careful what you wish for. We have so many things to vote on in California. I had to vote there's a recurring joke of like we voted for many straight years on a kidney dialysis ballot initiative.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah.
Like
So many times.
which
Yeah,
is
well,
crazy.
it's nice for political nerds who get to like research, and I enjoy researching every ballot measure and then sending them to my parents and stuff who trust it. But thank you so much, Armand. We don't want to hold you too much longer. We really appreciate it. Our first guest, and it's nice to have you back on. I wish it was wish we had more to celebrate in terms of the country and the world, but lots to talk about. And I think we want to such a kind of depressing week or so. If we could end with, what is one thing that you're kind of optimistic for in the next year or so, politically or otherwise, I suppose, but in terms of the effect of these tariffs, or just in general, what's something you're optimistic for in the next year or so? And I would say one of mine is I think this is going to cause a lot of backlash to like tariff type policies, and my hope is that President, let's say Josh Shapiro, although I don't have any that's not an endorsement, but will be willing to touch the Jones Act when he takes office, and I would very much like to see that. So,
and for the audience, if you're not familiar, Jones Act is a law from the 1920s that basically says that you can't ship between two American ports unless you use a ship made in the United States, with American crews. That's actually a really good example in this context, because that's like the most protectionist law you could ever pass. Like, it's not a tariff, it's just illegal. And America has like 27 ships like that. Like, it just has not worked. But yeah, that would be great if we could
and Biden
get
considered
reform.
touching it, but like feared, I think, some of the union backlash and stuff. So hopefully this fuels it. But yeah.
In terms of what I'm hopeful for, so I'm going to shill my own little thing for right now, is so YIMBYs for Harris, which we started during the campaign, has now become YIMBY Democrats for America. And sort of our primary thing is going to be a podcast called Radio Abundance. So we're going to be producing content around like trying to spread the ideas of abundance, with the idea being like YIMBY is now evolving to like a broader portfolio of ideas. And there's a lot of different people doing stuff in the abundance space. Like, our goal is to be a media platform for messaging and ideas around that, because I want it to be like this to be the default like democratic position and belief, and to continue. So I think these books are great that have come out, but you need a continuous channel. We've got interviews with Congressman Jake Auchincloss from Massachusetts, Governor Wes Moore from Maryland, who's awesome. Congressman Robert Garcia, who's like one of the chairs of the YIMBY caucus, and just a bunch of good people. So if you're interested in that, look up YIMBY Dems on Twitter. You can now see online. We haven't like done a full public launch, but you can already look up the podcast like on Spotify and whatever. It's called Radio Abundance. That gives me hope. I'd love to have you guys on it at some point. The other thing I'm going to give me hope is, and to be very cheesy, you guys are doing great. I've been like listening to your podcasts. Like, I was the first guest, and you found a voice. Like, you have a fun dynamic. I think it's a voice the Democratic Party really needs. You speak to things that like other people, people my age wouldn't get. We just live a different life. And I think you guys are doing great, and keep it up. You give me hope.
Awesome. We appreciate that, and that's awesome to hear. I knew you guys had shifted to like YIMBY Democrats, but that's awesome to hear. I'm excited to listen, and we'll be sure to link that in the description so you guys can just scroll down and make sure to check that out. That'll be awesome. David, you got any optimism?
Yeah, I guess I will say my hopeful thing is that maybe any changes created kind of in the Democratic Party's ideological aims and like tangible goals, that public transportation will have a bigger place and be more easy to advocate for, and more people understand its importance moving forward. And also, if maybe and regulations will ease a bit on the things that make public transportation possible. So,
well, that would be great to see. We maybe we'll have, hopefully we'll do our like quarterly Armand check-in, and hopefully some of it will have some of our hopes will have come true by then, or at least be on a better path. Well, thank you guys for listening. Thank you for joining us, Armand, and yeah, make sure we got a lot of fun content coming out in the next few weeks or so. So stay tuned to the Brogressive feed. But thank you guys for listening. Have a good one.
Thank you.